So welcome everybody. Today's event is called Behind the Scenes, Journeys Toward Mental Wellness. It's being brought to you by United Way of Broward County's Commission on Behavioral Health and Drug Prevention, and specifically by the Mental Health Promotion Action Team, which we like to shorten as MPAT. And we are so excited to be able to bring you this event today. Our goal for the event is to really highlight personal experiences, lived experiences of real people who have experienced mental illness, mental health conditions, either directly through their own personal experiences or through those of a loved one, to really, raise awareness about this important topic that affects many more of us than we might realize, and it even starts at an earlier age, even already in the teenage years, which many people don't realize necessarily. And so we just want to, break the stigma, reduce stigma, speak about this important topic, and maybe we'll learn from these people's, from our panelists' experiences, some important lessons, whether that's, what helped them, important coping strategies, how to recognize maybe symptoms, or that something might be going on with someone's mental health, either yourself or those around you, and so much more. It's just really critical to talk about these topics in our belief. I'd like to welcome onto the screen my amazing co-chairs for our Mental Health Promotion Action Team. They just want to say hi, turn on their videos, and wave for a moment. So that's Judge Ginger Lerner-Wren.
Welcome, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you, Judge Wren. She's an amazing pioneer. She's a judge here in Broward County, the 17th Circuit Court, and pioneer of America's first mental health court. So sorry, I interrupted you before, Judge Wren. You can say hi.
No, not at all. Just thanks everybody for being here. I'm so looking forward to this event.
Thank you, Judge Wren. And then we also have Dr. Sandra Kumper-Boynton, who is Executive Director of NAMI, which stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness, Broward County, also an amazing advocate for mental health and important supports for those with mental illness. Would you like to say hi, Sandra? Thanks, Sandra,
for being here. I'm sure this is going to be an enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And we apologize in advance if I know with the weather, some of our Zooms are a little glitchy, so please bear with us. We're really thankful to have you all here. All right, and then also I want to please call to all of your attentions that today's topic, the overall event, we really want it to be powerful and empowering and positive and to give hope. But we also realize that some of the topics that are going to be discussed are a little more sensitive, and in case you feel triggered in any way, or you feel like you need to reach out for help or just to talk to someone, we have a lot of great options for you here today, and they'll be put in the chat in a moment by Angela Ventura, my supervisor. So first and foremost, if you feel that you are in crisis, and are considering suicide or harming yourself in any way, please do not hesitate and right away reach out and call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. That number is going to be put in the chat in a moment. This is a number you can call any time of day, 24/7, including now. So that's option one. Option two, if it's not something as emergent, but you would like to speak to someone, you want to maybe find out options for getting connected to care such as mental health counseling or therapy, then you can always 24/7 as well dial 211. It's just, those are the numbers, right? Dial 211, and they can provide you with whatever you need. They'll also be happy to speak with you, and they're licensed to do that, but they have many services in their directories that they can connect you and refer you to. And that also extends beyond just mental health or substance use counseling, but just many other services available across Broward County, including issues with housing, food, other basic needs, etc. And then finally, we have a special treat for today. We have a licensed mental health counselor who I'll invite to join me on screen. He's fantastic. His name is Rafis Nin. And during the time of today's event, if you'd like to reach out to somebody that's not as emergent, again, if you're in crisis, please dial National Suicide Prevention Lifeline right away. But if you would like to speak with somebody also about mental health, and any support you would like during the time of today's event from 6 to 7:25 p.m. The event ends at 7:30, but you can call him until 7:25. And Rafis will be happy to speak with you and help in any way he can. His number is about to be put into the chat as well. And Rafis, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, just excited to be here. Any question, put in the chat. Don't be afraid to reach out for any questions or anything that you have concerning. You don't have to suffer alone or just any questions. We are here for you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Rafis. Just to quickly clarify, the chat will be turned off for most of the event, but when Rafis is referring to the Q&A, you can feel free to please put your questions in the Q&A. Rafis, when should somebody reach out for help? Is it, just now or just, if they're really feeling in crisis? Or what would you recommend?
My recommendation is to always try to get help as soon as possible. Don't wait until the last minute. It's okay to call in a crisis, but if you realize that something is not right, just talk to someone. It's just better to do it early on. But it's never too late. But always is good to ask. You don't have to be in full panic or, it could be okay. Just a question or a concern.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And of course, if you are in crisis, please don't hesitate and make sure you do call and reach out for help. But we encourage you all to reach out even sooner than that if possible. So Rafis is your friendly face. He'll be keeping an eye on the Q&A as well. But feel free to call him during the event if you would like to speak with somebody regarding any of the topics that are discussed. Right. Thank you so much, Rafis. You're amazing. All right. And now, without further ado, oh, by the way, my name is Carol Cohen and I work for United Way Broward Commission. If that wasn't apparent, that's where this event is coming from. If you just joined us today, we're really looking forward to having you with us until 7:30 p.m. So now we're going to hand it over to our amazing panel who you are all here to see and listen and learn from. It's going to be moderated. Today's panel will be moderated by Susan Nyamura. She has a master's in social work as well as additional licenses. She is the president. And Susan, feel free to join me on screen. So Susan is the president and CEO of South Florida Wellness Network. She is a devoted advocate for individuals and families impacted by mental health and substance use challenges. Ms. Nyamura has made a personal commitment to empower and educate others by sharing her experience, strength, and hope. She believes that natural supports are beneficial to everyone's wellness. As a longtime person in recovery herself, Susan understands the importance of personal responsibility as well as individual recovery pathways. So she's going to be our amazing moderator for today. I'm just going to help her get on the screen really quickly. And you're in for a real treat with Susan and with all of our panelists today.
Thank you, Corral. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for being here today. I'm actually have a different role than I'm used to having. Usually I'm coming from the lived experience perspective as a woman in long-term recovery, but I'm really grateful to serve as a panel moderator, because I think you are definitely in for a treat, and it's definitely an understatement because some of these panelists that are coming have an incredible story that they would like to share with you all. And I get the privilege of introducing them all and just engaging with them in a very important conversation surrounding mental health. So without further ado, I would like to open it up and introduce our very first panelist, who is Christine Coaster. Christine is the Recovery Vision Team Leader at Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale in South Florida. She recently graduated summa cum laude from Trinity International University with a BA in psychology and is pursuing her master's degree at St. Leo University in social work. Christine is passionate about bridging the gap between the faith community and the behavioral health field. She accomplishes this through education, prevention, intervention, and advocacy efforts within the church and in the community, including participation in 3 different communities. So Christine, I'm opening it up to you to share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Susan. So I just wanted to share how my mental wellness journey started off. It was very dark. My mother passed away when I was just a few weeks old, and my father coped with this by using substances, being comforted by women, and through illegal activities. Growing up, there was little to no adult supervision. This left us kids to fend for ourselves. And when I say kids, I do not mean my other siblings, but other children who were experiencing a similar lifestyle. Life was unstructured and unstable. I was shuffled from family members to neighbors and spent much of the time with people and kids that were not my family. I found drugs and paraphernalia around the house and places where I would be. I was exposed to sex, pornography, and even was molested. When I was with my father, he was verbally abusive and physically abusive. All the brokenness I was exposed to taught me to cope in a similar way. I did not know how to deal with life or how to regulate my emotions. So often I felt filled with anxiety, depression, and overwhelming feelings of helplessness as I entered my teenage years. At 13, I began taking Benadryl regularly for my anxiety and sleep. I would sleep all day. I did not finish my homework assignments or participate in the things I once enjoyed, like fishing and swimming and basketball and volleyball. Eventually, I dropped out of school and began using drugs. Feeling like I could not deal with life, I tried to commit suicide for the first time at age 15. I would eventually fall into a trap of heavy drug use, toxic relationships, and eventually incarceration. I did not recognize what I had experienced, but in retrospect, I know that these are all signs I had experienced trauma and learned maladaptive behaviors to deal with stress and a mood disorder. On the other side of this, I was introduced to God. I loved going to school, mainly because I would receive praise and did very well academically. Some of the friends I made would take this bus to the church in our area. I would get on that bus just not to be at home, and I would get to hang out with my friends. I had no idea the impact it would make in my life later. Through many trips to the county jail, I would go to a program unit called Lifestyles, where the Word of God would be taught. I heard about Christian programs where you could go and receive help with life issues. In March of 2011, I decided to go to one of these homes. I learned how to renew the mind through meditation on the Word of God. The first part of the Bible I actually learned is in Philippians 4, and I'd like to share that with you. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and mind through Christ Jesus. This was very comforting to me, that I could find something that would help me to cope with what was going on in my mind. There's a second part of this that says, meditate on these things. And it says, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, lovely, and good rapport, if there's any virtue and if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. And I just repeated that over and over to myself whenever I felt overwhelmed or anxious. I learned to replace the labels others had given to me with the truth of the identity God has given me. I was not worthless. but worth more than rubies and fearfully and wonderfully made. I found out that what I was dealing with was a generational issue passed on from generation to generation. And I learned how to receive forgiveness for things that I had done to others and extended forgiveness to those who had done things to me. And now I have practical tools and have learned to not only cope with life's issues, but to actually live. Thank you for letting me share.
Christine, thank you so much for sharing a part of your story with us today. In a few moments after we introduce the other panelists, we're definitely going to invite you back to ask a few more questions about how your journey in wellness continues to just light up your world today, because I see that and I definitely can sense the peace from you. So thank you so much for being with us here tonight. And please stand by as I get ready to introduce our next panelist. Our next panelist is Benjamin McCarthy. Benjamin is a public speaker as well as a doctoral student focusing on wellness coaching and health education. He has worked with different organizations ranging from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI Broward, for which he serves on the board, and Mental Health America. His mental health journey started after his psychotic episode the summer after his freshman year at Georgetown University. So without further ado, Benjamin, I invite you to share a part of your story with us.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I'm super excited to be here. Every time I speak in United Way, I always talk about how I went to Cooper City High School and I was president of Drug Free Youth in town. So it's always really cool to come back and give back to the community. So just like you talked about, Susan, my journey really started the summer after my freshman year at Georgetown. I had a challenging time, I would say, definitely my freshman year, but I was having a lot of symptoms, a lot of, delusions. Some of them were me thinking things like I was going to go to law school without graduating from undergrad, believing that I was, some form of, that I could fly, and that I was Beethoven. So I had a lot of these symptoms and, for some reason, my family really didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on, but then I went to Peru. And then after I went to Peru, I basically left my parents and I was hospitalized there for about 2 weeks. I was there for a month. And then I came back to the United States where I was given the medication, the proper medication. And I was able to, I would say, like snap out of the delusions. It was definitely really difficult going back into college, but I was accepted back into Georgetown. It was definitely an experience because I really had to focus on like my wellness and my journey. But oftentimes, since I was just, getting used to the medication, there were a lot of problems and there were a lot of side effects that I had to deal with. And there were things that I didn't know that really caused me to suffer while I was at Georgetown. I thankfully, even though it was really difficult, I had a good support system. I was able to graduate, barely with a 3.0. And then I decided that, I want to work in a field that is about, mental health, mental illness, because this is something that affects me every single day. So then I worked at Mental Health America, and then I learned from there. I was health insurance navigator, and then I learned from there. I was like, you know what, let me further my education. So gratefully, I was able to go to Emory, get my master's in public health, but things were a lot better there because I knew that because of my mental illness, I qualified for extra time when it came to testing and extra times for essays. And I had a stronger support system, which was, very, very helpful. I knew how to take care of myself. So throughout that, I was very privileged to be able to work the Center for Disease Control, doing policy, as well as the NAMI Georgia, which was like the state, it wasn't the affiliate, it was a state office. So I had a really good time. I was able to graduate, do relatively well, graduated with a 3.9. Then I realized that I wanted to give back to the community. So I became a peer specialist. I got my training, became a peer specialist, and I came down. It was definitely an interesting experience, getting to come down actually and do work in the community, and also be a part of a different perspective and sort of giving back. I was a consumer. I still am a consumer, but I didn't know the resources. Now I'm somebody who knows the resources, who knows what to do. So I've been very, grateful to, even actually when I came down here, the first thing I did was, I want to get involved in NAMI. So I contacted NAMI Broward, and since then I've been doing a lot of public speaking engagements, whether it's going to universities, to addiction treatment centers. And my focus now, as was said in the bio, is I've been really focusing on getting my doctorate in public health, focusing on health education and wellness. If there's anything that I learned, it's been a struggle, and it still is a struggle. I'm still going through things. It's not an easy journey. But if there's anything that I learned throughout this pandemic for wellness, and I'll leave this at that, is that I really learned that sometimes, and I was really hard on myself based off of, the type of person that I am and like to achieve, that not being productive is productive, and to not feel guilty about those days and those times where you're not doing anything, because you need those days to recharge. And I constantly have to remind myself that I need to be healthy. I need to be emotionally healthy so that I can continue to my success. So thank you very much for having me here.
Benjamin, thank you so much. And thank you so much for ending it the way you did. Obviously, we're talking about the journey towards mental wellness, and you couldn't have phrased it any better when you said you need that time to recharge, and just how important that is. So thank you for that. Be sure that I will follow that up soon with some other questions pertaining to how you are recharging in your life. So thank you again. And now I'm going to have the pleasure of introducing Sergeant Lynette Shaw. Lynette Shaw recently retired after 27 years as a veteran police sergeant and being a world-renowned fugitive investigator for 13 years. Her many accomplishments include training over 15,000 first responders through a crisis intervention team program, creating a mental health curriculum for veteran police officers and new recruits, and mentoring thousands of teens and college students. Today, she continues to serve as an advocate and public speaker on mental wellness, and is featured in a new documentary on first responders' mental health. So without further ado, I want to first thank you for your service and continued service, Lynette, and I welcome you to share a little bit of your journey with us here tonight.
Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me. My story begins at a very, very young age, and I'd like to just explain how that can affect you later on. So I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, pretty depressed city, and we didn't have very much, and I had a single mom. And a significant event happened when my uncle took me to school one day. I figured, because my mom worked 3 jobs, I'm not going to go to school that day. So I back out of my playground at 7 years old, and I'm going to walk back home and just go home. But I back out of the playground underneath a trailer, and I was grabbed from behind and dragged into a building across the street, and by 6 guys. I was tied up, I was raped, and then left for dead. I bit through the ropes that I was tied with and walked home. I walked home, I got into the bed, and by the time my mom got home, I had about 105 fever. And back in the day, they did not take you to the hospital or anything like that. Probably about 6-7 days later, my mom, I never said anything, and I never said anything because I was 7 years old and I was playing hooky from school. And I was playing hooky from school, and didn't want to get beaten. I didn't want to get in trouble. And I grew up where I grew up and how I grew up, very, very dysfunctional. I watched my mom get beat. And I tell you this because as I went back to school 6 days later, my behavior started to change. And it changed in a way where I would fight, and I would, where I saw bullies messing with other people, I would fight for them, and nobody saw that my grades went down, and nobody saw that, not a teacher, not a principal, not anybody in the school. And so I'm gonna just fast forward. I got through that, so to speak, and my dad was a bail bondsman, and I started to work in his office. And then subsequently, I was taught how to identify people that they were looking for on the street, fugitives. And by the age of 18, I knew how to identify people. I had a photographic memory. I found that I had a photographic memory. And so I started to go out and look for criminals on the street with other police officers. They used me as someone that could identify somebody. But at the age of 18, 19, I became a full-fledged fugitive investigator. And I would do the craziest things. I would jump from roof to roof running after people in Manhattan. I do undercover things by myself, just putting myself in very dangerous situations. And so I didn't know at the time that, risky behavior, was a sign. And so eventually I became very proficient at finding people, and I'd bring in over 400 people in a year. And so the New York Post deemed me America's top bounty hunter. America's top bounty hunter is a girl, all this on the front pages of the newspaper. And again, my partners that worked with me, I had an 8-man squad at that time. They didn't see me. They just thought I was badass. This is somebody that I want to work with, and they're excited about it. But I was absolutely suicidal at that time. After that, I became a police officer. I went to the police academy. Again, nobody saw me. And it wasn't until I became a police officer and I was there for a while that I realized certain things were triggering me. Anything where somebody would tell me what to do, I felt trapped. Any time I felt trapped, and I had no idea what it was. I had buried everything. And so going through the trauma that I had gone through and working in a police department, it didn't affect me in the way that probably you would think it would. I was more compassionate. I understood a lot of people. I really got to know my community, and I loved my community, but I was suffering silently. And many of us who are on police departments that see so many tragic things happen, we suffer in silence. And the adverse childhood experiences that I had just made it a cumulative trauma. And so I finally was able to realize that I had a mental illness. I didn't know what it was. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I started to go to counseling, and it changed my life, and it changed my perspective, and it made me just want to reach out to others and to tell my story in many different ways. There's so much, we don't have enough time here for it, but I am reaching back and making sure that people like me get the help that they need. And so I now teach classes about mental health, wellness classes for police officers and first responders. And so I'm just really happy that I have the opportunity to, tell a little bit about my story to everyone that is on this call. And thank you.
Thank you again so much for sharing of yourself. That definitely was not anything that I was expected, but I can definitely see how your pain has fueled your passion and your purpose. And I really appreciate your open, honest conversation with us. And I look forward to diving in and just finding out what supports your wellness even more on this journey. So thank you again. I now get the opportunity to introduce our last panelist, Marsha Jackson. Marsha Jackson has been an occupational therapist in Florida for over 20 years, working mostly in the behavioral health and home health rehabilitation. She has a master's in education with a focus on family therapy. She is an advocate for NAMI Broward and the Stepping Up Initiative, a national effort to reduce the number of people with mental illness in jails. She is a mother of a 25-year-old son living in recovery from a serious mental illness, bipolar type 1 with psychosis, and a history of substance abuse. So without further ado, Marsha, I invite you to share your family recovery story with us tonight.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is the first time sharing my story, but you know, my journey with mental health, my experiences go way as far back as I can remember. You know, we have our birth families, our adoptive families, our friend families, our spiritual families, our social families, and all these experiences kind of make us who we are today. Things we've witnessed, things we've experienced. At a very young age, I always wanted to help others, you know, especially people that were suffering. And naturally, when I grew up, I went into the healthcare field, social service field, and that was my first professional exposure to mental health, mental illness. Worked with a lot of people, and the one thing that I learned from them, no matter how much adversity they went through, I think the one thing that got them through was hope. You know, hope for a glimmer of relief, hope for better days ahead. It was very inspiring to see people, you know, living their life in recovery with all these, you know, these obstacles in their way. And kind of fast forward, I ended up, I have twin boys, twin guys. They're 25 years old now. And you know, I had gotten divorced by the time my kids were even 2, and we had, you know, pretty typical household. I tried to keep stability and love in the home. We did a lot of fun things. Life was pretty good. We had our ups and our downs, but it was around when my son turned age 15 that I really started to have different kind of worries. I noticed that my son, that was always very social and fun loving and outgoing, became extremely moody, anxious. And there were times of increased activity and times when he would just sleep excessively. You know, and around that time he started failing out of school and started dabbling with some drugs. And you know, it was really hard. I worked in the field, right? I should recognize what's going on, and I didn't, and I beat myself up over that for a bit. But I wasn't quite sure, you know, if it was an adjustment to, you know, problems going on, or if it was about the drugs, or if there was a mental illness, and it was really hard to figure things out. But when my son started becoming just increasingly grumpy and religiously preoccupied, secretive, and he'd walk around with headphones on all day. And I realized he was responding to internal stimuli, which, you know, he did actually tell me that there were voices, you know, some good voices, some bad voices. So it was quite scary trying to find a psychiatrist to treat an adolescent, and then actually get an appointment was almost near impossible. But we tried, and the first diagnosis was with ADHD. We had, you know, he had been screened for that before, and I didn't really know if it fit, but that was what they diagnosed him with and medicated him for. Things just kept going on and getting worse from there. in my family, in our family, there was a lot of stigma around mental illness. So it was okay to have an addiction problem, but not really okay to have a mental illness. So my son was going to addiction treatment centers. He went to many different treatment centers. To be honest, he's been admitted to the hospital and programmed so many times that I've lost count over the past 10 years. But eventually he was diagnosed with a bipolar 1 mania, psychosis. And so he was able to start to get on the right medication, if only he would take it. Inconsistent with his meds, still dabbling with marijuana, and it was really hard to figure out what was going on with him. I started to develop my own traumatic experiences from all that our family was going through and what my son was struggling with. It started to affect my health. I was having a hard time sleeping. I felt alone. I felt isolated. I started having chest discomfort. It was really starting to get to me physically. At the recommendation of a counselor, a private counselor that I had, I learned about NAMI, and NAMI helped me so much. It gave me a whole newfound hope. And so I was really able to just learn so many tools and felt like I wasn't alone in dealing with this. And there's been a lot of ups and downs. I think the worst possible moment was when my son, around 2 years ago, around the time of his New Year's, he took a golf cart at the apartment complex where he lived. He took it for a joyride and thought it was fun and funny and all that. He came back a few minutes later. He was arrested and charged with a felony, grand theft auto, which landed him in jail for 10 days with no medications. And that was just a heart-wrenching experience for all of us. And it was then that I became involved in advocacy with NAMI and for the Stepping Up initiative. Today I like to think of ourselves as a family in recovery. It's a journey. We will always be dealing with these challenges, but I've learned I'm not alone. I want my son to know he's not alone, and other people out there as well struggling, because there were times when I was embarrassed. I'm a professional. I should know how to handle this. I should recognize things more. I don't want to talk about it. My problems aren't so bad. Listen, the other things that are happening to people are way worse. But we're all important, and all of our journeys are important. So thank you for having me here today.
Marsha, thank you so much. And thank you for being as honest as you were. I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and I really appreciate, just your open transparency, especially somebody working in the field. It always feels much different when it's your own family, though. I can definitely connect with that. So thank you again very much. I wanted to invite the other panelists back on so we can just have a few questions, just to kind of get some feedback from you all. You guys have shared so much with all of us. And again, thank you so much, because I can see the progression and how recovery kind of takes place, right? And we have moments where we know that recovery is not linear, that when we're working on our wellness, that sometimes things are flowing really well, and then we may hit a little pocket of something that we need to step back and we need to recharge, as Benjamin was saying. So I think that's really a great thing. But just to kind of touch basis, I guess I'll start with Christine, since you went first. Christine, if that's okay with you. You shared a lot, about the impact of trauma and how it kind of played a role in your life and how things kind of progressed. And you definitely touched on how your strength has come from your God. It sounds like, your faith has played a strong component in your life. If you were an individual that may have very similar experiences and you didn't have faith, what would you suggest to somebody that was just looking to find some comfort in their life?
Yes, thank you for that question, Susan. Comfort doesn't come from within. And so finding externally a community And finding people that can surround you and help you to walk through some of those things has been very impactful, aside from my faith and my belief in God. If I did not have the community that I have today, the people that help me to stay accountable, the people to bounce things off of, and that mentorship and sponsorship and discipleship that I experience, I know that it would make it more difficult on my journey.
Thank you so much for that, Christine. And I want to kind of turn it over to Marsha, because I think Marsha also said something about support playing a significant role in her recovery journey. So Marsha, what do you do for that support that you get when your family is struggling?
Well, you know, I grew up with a stronger spiritual background, a religious faith background, but as I got older and things that had happened, I had gotten away from that. So sometimes I wish I had that, but I didn't have that to fall on. It wasn't helpful for me. So the things I just had to dig in so deep sometimes. I've kind of been in therapy my whole life, so I kept with the therapy. I went to the NAMI support group. First, I educated myself on mental illness from the family perspective, and not as a professional, but as a person, you know, living with this in our family. And I met a few people that I could really speak to, and that helped a lot. I wasn't alone, you know. It was really hard. And I think for me, the things that got me through, especially with the physical manifestations, is I just had to. There were times when I would just have to breathe, and breathing was always with me, no matter where I was. I would literally just have to stop and take just some deep breaths. And sometimes I would just walk. I would walk so far, but it really helped to relieve my stress. Music, just nurturing myself, you know, surrounding myself with positive, supportive people, and then kind of distancing myself from other relationships that weren't helpful and were hurtful.
Great, thank you so much. It sounds like you have some tools in that toolbox of yours, huh?
Yes.
Good for you. So Benjamin, the same question for you, because it sounds like you tap into some personal supports of your own. Would you be willing to share with us some supports and things that are supportive for you in your journey?
Sure. I think for me, the number one thing that I have is a really supportive family. And I also have friends that I can be open with. That's actually been really helpful, because sometimes you don't really know yourself that well and your friends do. And there's been multiple times where my friends have like brought this certain thing out, and I was like, that's so interesting. And then I got it checked out, and I was like, that's, you know, I didn't realize that I was really going through, you know, what now is like PTSD. I didn't realize I had PTSD, but my friend was like, if you're going through these things, it seems like, you know, it's a pattern that I see. And that I think has been, especially recently, I've noticed how helpful it's been. Even them recognizing some of my mood swings, and they're like, have you thought about, you know, could you get, you know, another medication, like something's different. And sometimes I can be very prideful at times. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, I've been stable for such a long time. Like, I'm not going to do that. But then I remember my friend was like, no, you should look into these things. I was like, okay, fine, I will. And then I finally, you know, spoke to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist was like, well, let me put you on something else. And then I remember taking, you know, that medicine and just really being like, wow, is this like, is this really how life is supposed to be? Like, I'm actually, I thought I was stable, but like, because, you know, I was doing things, school, doing well, but emotionally, I must have not been as stable. And whenever I took that plunge and believed like what my closest friend was saying, now I feel a lot better, and I'm less stressed out, less suicidal. So having that support system has been very helpful. I also think just doing things that I enjoy, rewarding myself on days that I feel not that great. For me, a reward, and it's a healthy reward, you know, for me, a reward is like going and buying like, you know, fresh coconut water, or going to get like a really healthy smoothie. So if I'm feeling down, I'm like, you know what, like, let me treat myself today to a nice smoothie. So at least I know it's actually healthy. So that's that. And then the last thing is also recognizing when it's okay to not be okay and like walk out of a situation. I think that happened recently when I was watching like a movie and I was going through, like flashbacks and things like that. And, at that time I was like, no, I should like continue watching this movie. Like I came here to watch a movie to de-stress. That was the whole point of me going out. But then I recognized, you know what, like this is actually, it's getting things are getting worse. So I pretty much gave myself, the grace to, let me step outside. Even though I did go through some stuff when I did that, it just allowed me to recharge. So I think being really open, being humble, has been very helpful with my journey. Hopefully that answers the question.
You, Benjamin. Yeah, it does. You actually added to it. And I was thinking about that because when you were sharing your story and you had talked about how your family didn't know what was going on and you didn't know what was going on, but you knew something was going on and maybe the medication needed to change. I'm wondering if there's an individual that may be listening and may have had some type of experience where they didn't know what was going on and maybe they didn't tell their family or their family didn't know. What helped you to be able to have those conversations or to let people in to say, hey, Benjamin, things may not be going so well for you? Is there anything that you could leave somebody with that they may be encouraged to walk through the same way you did?
Yeah. So I guess for me, I think for me, it was really difficult in terms of, my personality. Like I was saying before, sometimes I can be at times really prideful about things and very, this is how everything needs to be. But I think something that really has helped me throughout this process is recognizing that you really can't control everything around you. And you have to be willing to recognize that that is okay. I'm still, going through that. I'm still going through therapy. I'm still working through that almost every single day. But knowing that, I, can't control every situation and that, at the end of the day, it really takes a village to get through this, right? You can't get through it by yourself. If anything, that's what's humbled me the most is, oftentimes I want to get through this on my own. I want to get through this on my own. But what I've learned through so many different resources, whether it's through the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, the RAP program, and just even within my own experiences, is that I recognize that if I didn't have other people and if I was not vulnerable, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at today. So I think it's just like recognizing that, you can't really control everything, being humble, and then also recognizing that for your recovery, it is important to have a support system, because if you don't have that support system, it's going to be really difficult for you to be able to move forward in life.
Benjamin, thank you so much for that. That's a real open, honest conversation. And if there's anybody here that's listening or is questioning whether or not what they need to be doing, you heard there's a key word that I heard come up a couple times, and that's support. And I know that there was a couple numbers that were dropped in the chat. Please make sure to reach out for support if you need the additional help. There are hotlines that you can call and individual cell phone numbers. So we do want to acknowledge that sometimes this is a very difficult process. And sometimes it takes a little while to build that village. And it sounds like, Benjamin, you are still working on it. So it is a work in progress. It's a lifelong journey towards wellness. So please don't forget to reach out to those that care about you. So Lynette, I want to bring it over to you and just kind of follow up on some of the things that you said. There were so many powerful things that you had mentioned in your story. And you talked about being suicidal and nobody saw me. And that was something that really stuck out for me. And it almost like makes me emotional. And I'm like, okay, Susan, you're going to have to say that, and how many people suffer in silence. If there was something that you can say to somebody that was feeling like you did. Nobody saw me, and something that would help people understand that they do not have to suffer alone. Could you share what that might be?
Absolutely. They say that the number one protective factor in keeping somebody from, committing suicide is having one person that you trust and that you can talk to, and, just one person. And I had that one person who was a friend of mine, and she actually was able to talk me into going to counseling because, in law enforcement, we don't want to be seen as weak. We don't want to be, we don't want to tell our business because the first thing they do is take our guns away and think that we're dangerous. And I am so grateful that I took that step into counseling. And I still today, that was over 20 some years ago. And today I still see a therapist, and every single week, whether I need them or not. And it's really important to have that thing that just carries you. And while I believe that I am healed, and I have so many great coping mechanisms that I've been able to hone over the years. And it totally saved my life going to counseling. And you don't have to suffer alone, because there's always something. And I heard one of the panelists, Marcia, say that I heard her say that I'm losing my train of thought, but you said something that, it takes more community. It takes I never had that. I was always the one looked at, and so are a lot of law enforcement, looked at as the one to fix everything, right? And you were looked, to fix everything because you had the knowledge. And having that responsibility, it almost stops you from, wanting to get help. But it was the thing, going to therapy and getting those coping mechanisms going. And then when I started to create curriculum on mental health, it helped me so much in the healing process to go out and help others. And I recognized that when I went out to speak, or when I taught in the police academy, that all of a sudden, these people that never opened up to anybody, they opened up to me, and they opened up in a room full of other police officers or other teachers or other, wherever I taught. And it's so important to tell your story. And I thank everybody that's on this panel right now, because it gives others the courage to either tell their stories or to ask for help. We are not alone. And I thought that I was, and I thought that nobody saw me. And in some sense, they did not. But now I have a voice, and I'm going to use it to pull as many people up as I can. And I think the panelists that are here are doing the same thing in their own ways. And I'm just very grateful to be amongst, people that are able to speak. In my business, my hashtag is just talk about it, because we bury so much. And if we just talk about it, it's so freeing. And every single time I tell my story, every single time that I see somebody is helped by it, I heal more. That 7-year-old little girl is healed more every single time.
I have to agree with the power of telling your story and getting it out. There's something about it that is so healing, cathartic. It's like not a secret anymore. That's the first step. And we are so quick to stigmatize ourselves. We're here trying to help everyone. But when it comes to I need a little help here, we're afraid to ask for it, or we're embarrassed to ask for it, or we're not deserving of it. But it's so important. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, it really is important to ask for, help, and not to be afraid to, and put down your pride. Or even with police officers and first responders, they're afraid. and they should be, because the first thing they want to do is take our weapons, or, you know, take us off the job, or, and we're actually asking for the help that we need, where we probably sustained the trauma on the job because of what the types of things that we see. And I want to make sure that, you know, first responders as well as teachers recognize those signs and symptoms, so that we can stop, you know, the taking of lives, you know, of we have to stop that. We have to get the stigma out of mental health, because nobody is crying or having a fit over somebody with heart disease, right? You just go to the doctor and you get help, right? So we need to normalize mental health, whereas it's a normal thing. We need that to function the same way you need medication for diabetes. We may need something to get our mind straight, and there's nothing wrong with that, no matter what you're doing in life.
It's like a complete paradigm shift, right? Because we're starting the conversations, and the conversations have been taking place. And the reality of it is there's still many people that are living in fear, right? Because it's that question, like you said, are we going to lose our jobs? Is there going to be a reasonable accommodation put into place? Are people going to judge me? What are the things that are taking place, you know? And a lot of times, you know, where I'm considered one of those peer people. So when you think about it, how do we help people to have that courage without stigmatizing and judging people for merely expressing a feeling, right? How do we allow people to say, you know, I am feeling actively suicidal, without necessarily saying that they need to be hospitalized? And maybe they do need to be hospitalized, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but can we have those conversations in a safe, productive way that allows people to speak up? Because you know, a few of you had mentioned, I think Christine, you had touched on a trauma early on, you know, early, the adverse childhood experiences. You know, when we're talking about prevention, are we looking at some of the adverse childhood experiences that manifest into something else much later in life, where people self-medicate, or they self-harm, or they do things that may take them in a different direction? So I love your hashtag, or your tagline that you said. Was it just talk about it?
Just talk about it.
Just talk about it. And I think that's really super important. And you guys have started the conversation. And I want to look at, you know, some of the things, and really talk to you again, Marcia. You know, I know that you brought things up, but as a parent, and what that is, because I know myself as a parent, and a lot of times as parents, our children are our worth, right? And so how do we not see the early warning signs? How do we not know what's going on? You know, because is it fearful? You know, are we going to be judged? Are the neighbors not going to bring us a casserole because our child has a mental illness and they're not getting out of the hospital for a broken leg, you know, and feeling that, you know, that experience and what that's like. And then you talked about how it started affecting your own physical health. So as a parent, if there's a parent here, and, you know, there's a lot of parents that oftentimes say, I just really want to help my kid. Can you please just fix my kid? And we know it's not about fixing, right? We know it's about really being there to support. What advice would you give to a parent that is just really starting to go through this journey, or maybe has been on this journey for a long time and has not been able to tell their story or to be able to share it out loud? Would there be one thing that you could share with them?
I think the most important thing in my healing and in our family's recovery is for me to forgive myself. You know, ditch the blame, ditch the guilt. That took me a super long time to get over that. But, you know, we're coming from a place of love. We're doing our best. We don't, you know, sometimes warning signs are tricky. You know, there's little decoys in the picture, and you don't always know. But I really had to learn to forgive myself and let go of that guilt and that shame and that blame. We didn't cause it. We can't cure it. We can't control it. And no matter how much I wanted to fix things and what I was willing to do, it wasn't really gonna, in the end, it wasn't gonna be enough. You know, and I realized I must take care of myself, or, you know, I'm gonna be ill and then I'll really be of no help. So the forgiveness, the nurturing myself, you know, was so important. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I think that, you know, if there's any parents or caregivers on the line, to really consider that, because that is such an important factor. And I just want to open it up. And Benjamin, if it's okay if I start with you and then I'll kind of go through. If you can say that there was one thing that was really beneficial in your support with your family system, what was that? You're on mute, Benjamin.
I apologize, something's going on with the computer. What did you, can you repeat that?
Sure. If there was one thing that you can say that your family did well in supporting you, would you share what that would be?
Sure. Actually, it was, at first it was, I think when I was younger, it was a bit annoying, but now in retrospect, it's been always, it's great. My mom and my dad, they would constantly ask me, you know, how was I doing? But then especially when it came to like my mental health, and they would ask, you know, how are you doing when it comes to taking your medication? How are you doing, you know, with all of that stuff? And, you know, especially when I was in college, I would get really frustrated because it's like, why are you nagging me? But it was really helpful in the sense that it kept me accountable to my, I would say, recovery. They would, you know, but that's the relationship that we had. I'm not necessarily saying that that's going to apply to everyone, right? Like, I'm not saying that you could do that to your child and that's going to work out. I mean, it can be a different situation. But I think that was probably the number one thing, was my family consistently asking me, how are you doing? Are you taking your medication? It was very helpful for sure. And it still is to this day, because they still ask those questions. So even though they know I take it all the time, they still ask. So
So when you say it's helpful, why do you think it's most helpful?
well, like I said before, it's just it kept me accountable. That's really what it comes down to. It's one of those things where, you know, like I said before, sometimes, you know, you can't just do this. This can be a lonely journey. So having that person there, you know, sort of normalizing it, saying that, hey, it's okay, like, you know, take your meds. It's totally fine. It normalizes it, because I think sometimes, especially, you know, I'll be honest with you, especially at in my age, there is that feeling of, you know, why am I taking, you know, so many medications, or like, why is it that, you know, about 15 to 20% of like my income goes towards, you know, medical bills. And it's very difficult being someone who's like 32 and dealing with that. It's a challenge, and it gets really frustrating at times. But the good thing is that my parents are always there for me, and always, you know, normalizing this and supporting me and saying it's okay. You know, how are you doing when it comes to your health, seeing their therapist, all of this stuff. They normalize it. I get frustrated sometimes that I'm spending this much money on these things, but my parents normalize it, and they say it is okay. This is for you. This is helpful for you. So do not feel guilty in this process. So that's been helpful.
Thanks, Benjamin. I appreciate that. So those parents that are out there that are asking those questions, continue asking those questions. They might be really helpful, or at least ask the person that you're supporting, you know, how helpful they are. So Christine, you highlighted support as well. And so I just wanted to circle back with you. In your circle of supports, what would you say is the most helpful thing that your supporters do for you?
Well, Susan, I believe that a lot of what I receive is just when people are willing to pray with me, willing to hear me and listen to me, even when I'm ranting about stuff or complaining, and then helping me to really come back to looking at it and facing what the reality of that situation might be. You know, even in all of this, I'm like, I'm nervous about talking. And I have my husband messaging me, you're doing great. You know, these are your peers. And so I think just the encouragement that is received from people that are within my circle, the people, like Benjamin said, that keep me accountable. And as Lynette said, just talking about it, the more that people are aware of what is going on with me, I believe that gives them the open door to ask me questions. And another thing that I really have experienced is I'm only responsible for me. So I only get as much accountability as I'm willing to ask for. And so I have to ask for that accountability.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I love how you shared that, you know, your husband's back there still supporting you, because we need support in all circumstances and situations. Because, you know, I too, you know, gotten some text message and people saying, how you doing over there? Is there anything that I can do for you? And when you give people permission to come into your life and support you, they will definitely do that. But I know for many of us, you know, early on, before we actually enter into that journey of wellness, it doesn't always feel that great. So if there's one thing that you can say to somebody, Lynette, that is just getting ready to maybe get enough courage to say something, you know, out loud, or maybe even to ask for help, how would you go about doing that?
Well, again, you know, and with anybody admitting that you have a problem or you have thoughts of suicide or anything like that is a very difficult thing. So it needs to be someone that they trust, and, you know, somebody that they feel safe with, because if we don't feel safe, we're not going to say anything and we will tend to isolate. And so coming out will be the most freeing. Coming out and talking about what you're going through is the most freeing thing that you can do for yourself. It opens you up to so much that you know, that you may have forgotten that you can do, right? I totally, my life changed when I started to consistently go to therapy. And anybody's life can. Now, it's not one size fits all. Sometimes somebody can take up cycling and be out in nature, or mess with their plants, or there's so many different coping mechanisms that people can use. Everybody doesn't have to go to counseling. Everybody doesn't have to be on medication. I was blessed enough not to have to use medication. And now I am finding that I need it for anxiety because I'm speaking so much in different venues to so many people. And so, I am now exploring, like, okay, what's going on? What's going on now? I've been fine. So it is a journey, as everyone on the panel has said, it's a journey. And so you'll have your ups and downs. I have so many more ups because of the courage that came from somewhere. I just believe everything happens for a reason. I know that God is in the midst. I know that for a fact. And I know that if anybody, is afraid to come out, and again, in different communities, the first responder community, they're afraid because, somebody may find out. There's other ways of handling that. If you're afraid, there's other resources outside of your county, outside of your state, that are free, and you're able to get that help. And it's not anonymous, but you can get that help. And it is so freeing. You want to be here for your kids. You want to be here, for your family. And you don't want to be in dark places when life is so freaking beautiful. And I never knew that until I got the help that I needed. And again, I wish that anybody who feels isolated, alone, to know that you are not alone. As much as, your mind could tell you that you are, we're here, we're right here, and we're here for you. If you need that help, just, take the lifeline.
Thank you so much, Lynette. And thank you, all of you. And, you guys all kind of touched on different things and different pathways. And, that's one of my biggest things is there's multiple pathways to recovery and wellness. And how you get there is ultimately up to you. It's just getting there, right? Because there's more fear staying in that dark place than there is by taking that first step of courage. So we encourage any of you that's listening that may need to take that first step of courage to please reach out for help. You know, there's a lot of people here that want to help you, and there's numbers that you can call. And to Lynette's point, there are definitely telehealth options now that are state funded. So please feel free to reach out. I do know that we're getting ready to go into the question and answer session. I know that there are quite a few that have been answered, but things that are still pending. So I just wanted to prepare you all. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's not a preparation thing. It's just being able to answer and address some of the things that are up here. So the first thing is there is an anonymous attendee, and it says first step, asking for help is the hardest. When people start suffering, they isolate and don't want to see anyone, and they ask for help when they are really suffering. How could we access them and offer help and not have them wait to ask for it? Who would like to take that one?
I can take that, Susan. I think it's so much easier when you give people an option, right? And you start talking to somebody and you say, well, what do you think about this? What do you think? You give them the control, because we don't feel like we have control when things are out of, whack, and we don't feel like we have that control. So if we go and talk to somebody, they may take my gun. They may, they may look at me differently because I'm thinking like this or whatever. And having people understand that, it's your choice. It's your choice to speak. But look, I see you, I see that you're hurting. If you'd like to talk at any time, just let me know, but not to force anybody down that path. Giving them the option and having them be in control of their own situation is really the way to go. Not you have to, you better, I saw you do this, and that does not work with people that are suffering. What works is, what do you think? I see you, and I noticed that, and when you want to talk, if you want to talk, I'm here. I see that you're hurting.
Thank you so much, Lynette, for that. I appreciate that. There's another question there. It says, what is a panelist's view of the 988 suicide hotline?
I'll answer it. I think it's a wonderful, when I was 15 and I first tried to commit suicide, I called a hotline that was available at the time in 1995. And, I don't feel like at that time I really received what I needed from that person on the other line. And to have a hotline that is available for people to speak to someone who is trained and understands what that feels like, and have peer specialists on the other line, and have people that are willing to just hear what that other person has to say could make a world of difference. I've heard Lynette say over and over, she didn't feel heard, she didn't feel seen. And I think a lot of times when you're dealing with mental health, whether it be depression or anxiety for me, growing up in the environment that I grew up in, and just really not feeling like I existed in my family because they were just not present. Having that person there just to speak life into you is ultimately so important.
I'd like to add something to that. The 988 lifeline is also going to be a number that people can call if you're in a behavioral health crisis. So a lot of times we're afraid to seek help because we're afraid of, the response from law enforcement or response of what will happen. But 988 will help us get a behavioral health response for behavioral health problem. So, and the other thing I would say, it's so important to educate yourself with what's in the community, even working in the field and being in the field professionally, personally. There's so many things I learn about every day, so many free programs, educational groups support groups, and they're out there. There's a lot of things out there. A lot of them are online that you could do if you're not comfortable, meeting in person. So there's so much to take advantage of.
Thank you, Marcia and Christine. I appreciate everybody chiming in. I do have one more question here, probably a couple more, but I'm definitely going to get through this one. It says, do you believe first responders / police officers should be evaluated for mental health concerns early or take psychological tests after major events? Every major event has an effect on a person's well-being, especially when the media starts to label you.
I will answer that. I believe yes, that's a big yes. There's so many of us that, come in from, and excuse the graphic, from peeling a child off of the pavement, that there's been an accident, or, just things that we experience every day, people in car accidents, and one's alive, the other one's not, and you're trying to do your job, and you have a kid that age, right? So it affects us, and it's cumulative. Imagine, in New Jersey, it's 30 years to retire, 25 years to retire, and many retire at 30 years. So imagine all of the things that have happened throughout your career, and you're a mess, right? I think every 6 months, or yearly, we need to be evaluated, psychologically evaluated, not necessarily after an event, because the mistake that they make is they send the clinicians and psychiatrists and everything in right after the event happens, and they think that police officers or first responders are going to talk the same way anybody else needs to. We need to process. And so having somebody in your face right away, it's okay, but we're not paying attention to you. It's that 6 weeks later, 7 weeks later, when you've forgotten about what's happening and we're re-experiencing it, right? That's when somebody needs to reach out. And to your question, absolutely, I think yearly checks, whether we have an event or not, just to see where we are. COVID put a big, dent in the mental health of first responders, all of them, EMS, firefighters, and police. And so over this time, things have gotten really bad. And with the social justice issues as well, they have gotten bad, because now it's you're being judged by the uniform, not your character, not how you treat other people. And so that's difficult. And the laws that are being passed, that don't protect police officers and first responders, those things are really weighing on the minds of first responders, and being checked could, really help out a lot. And they would have to, mandatory, and then they could get help in that way.
Thank you so much, Lynette. I appreciate, you have a lot of knowledge in there, so I appreciate all your feedback, and I'm sure the people on the line definitely do too. Thank you all. There is another question here. First of all, Michelle, thank you for your comments. It says, thank you all for being so open and vulnerable. Sharing what has helped you is so important, because just like our physical health, it's not a one size fits all. What do any of the panelists feel that we are missing in our community in helping those that need mental health assistance?
I will say, as a parent, and I think there needs to be more family involvement, especially when your child becomes a young adult, and, confidentiality and release of information, all that, it becomes very difficult to help. But yet we, some people have supportive families that have some good information, and it's sometimes almost impossible to get through to a case manager or a therapist. Not always, but sometimes. And we really need to be included more in the recovery process, and I think that would make a huge difference.
Susan, I really think that we're missing in the community education, especially in urban communities. They need to be educated. How could you expect a parent or anyone that could be a support to you to support when they don't know how to do that? It's important that we educate the community about what mental health is and is not, and how it looks. And, you know, somebody acting bizarre, you know, could be in an episode, you know, there, and or triggered, or, you know, but not calling them crazy, getting that, not, you know, making sure that we normalize this by educating our community. I think that's vitally important. We need to do it in our churches. We need to get to our, you know, our families. They think that they have a troubled child, but their child is bad, and they're not bad. There are some things that are underlying that they need to be educated about so that they can help them. No one can help anybody without first being informed and educated about what it is, how it works, what does it look like, and how can I get help? So education and resources, I would say, is where we're falling short. Being able to get those resources out there, and have people know when to utilize them.
I also
Great,
wanted
thank
to add to that, if that's okay. I wanted to add to that because one of the challenges that I have seen just in general working in the field is how there isn't really that much access to education for people who don't speak English. I mean, it's really difficult to go into communities if you know, mental health literacy is part of what I'm studying in health education, and it's really hard to get into those communities if, you know, we can't even speak their language. Not only if we can't speak their language, we also had to think about their culture as well, because just because you translate something into Spanish doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to apply to each and every single, you know, community. So I feel like that's a really missed opportunities that we're not going into communities who don't have access because we're just not translating it and we're not taking the time or the effort to do that per se.
I love that. I love that, Benjamin, what you said, because if we're not culturally competent to give this education in those communities, right, it means nothing to them. And that's why I do what I do, because one size does not fit all, especially culturally. You know, you say just talk about it. Some cultures is like, do not talk about it.
Exactly.
You know, we don't talk about it. I'm an African American female, and my family said whatever goes on in the house stays in the house. And so we're not supposed to talk about it. But of course, I'm a rebel. I'm going to do the opposite.
I think it happens. I think you guys are actually right on the money. And I think this is something for us to think about as we're thinking about future opportunities to have dialogue, right? Because I think that there are a lot of health disparities across the minority groups, right? And we see a lot of those things happening. And I think we could probably take the next section on. But I wanted to just really say thank you to all of you all, because we're getting towards that time where we have to wrap it up. And, you know, I really appreciate all of the information and the input that you guys put forth, such valuable testimonies of where you are in your mental health and wellness journey, which is amazing. I want to continue the conversation at a later time, but I definitely want to turn it over to Corral, because Corral is going to kind of wrap things up. But one thing that I just want to leave with everybody that's listening and to all of you that contributed to this is to recognize that there is multiple pathways to recovery, and it all looks very, very different for everybody. And we need to really start recognizing that and allow people to make informed decisions. And that's by getting them the culturally competent information that they actually need. So thank you all very much. Corral, thank you for having us all. We appreciate you, and we will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Susan, and all of our amazing panelists, Christine, Marsha, Lynette, and Benjamin. I think I speak for us all when I say that your stories, or really, to be honest, just the little snippets we were able to hear from your amazing stories were just so powerful. And we really thank each one of you for being so willing to be vulnerable and open and to share that with everybody here today. So just a huge round of applause and thank you. And I really hope everyone here today has learned something, at least one new thing that they, can take away from today's event and share with others, or use to empower yourself, if whatever, in whatever way that might be. If you feel motivated now to reach out to help, or you maybe can use this information to help somebody in your life, either personally or in your professional life. That's really our goal for today. And we really want to remind you that, recovery is possible, and that it's really important to have hope for the future, even if circumstances right now, or somewhere down the line seem, dire, or, that there's no solution. There's always another option, and there's always a way to move forward. So remember to support each other, and to support yourself. Don't harbor self-stigma. Even if you're working in the mental health profession, it's important to remember that we're all vulnerable. So I'm going to share just really quickly a few resources that I wanted to make sure you all had available, on hand. So this is not an all-inclusive list. Let me start by saying that, but this is just a list that we've curated over the last few years about of different resources available in the community. So just encourage you all to take a quick picture of that with your phone or a screenshot, either for yourself or, down the line, you want to be able to share that. Of course, we always encourage everyone to call 911 right away if it's an immediate dangerous situation, or one of the different crisis lines, if it's, someone's in crisis, considering suicide, etc. But then there's a lot of other services as well. Susan's organization is on there, South Florida Wellness Network, National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, which has a lot of great family support groups and programs, as well as many others. Just a quick note that here on the corner, on the side, you'll see that there's the Talk app. That's really great for students across Broward County Public Schools. Right, so all these resources I mentioned here are local. But the Talk app is really great. It's an easy way for students to submit a request, and then they'll be contacted within 24 hours from their school counselor to set up an appointment, a session, and they can receive multiple sessions. But a quick note though, that it's closed over the summer. So just to remember that if a student happens to submit a request over the summer, which is now, this is the last week of school. So starting the end of this week, they'll receive further instructions, what they can do to receive help. So that's really, it's meant for during the school year, and it's really easy way for them to do that. And of course, 211 Broward, we always strongly recommend, we mentioned that earlier in today's event, that someone can always dial that 24/7, and they'll be put in touch with one of their counselors, or one of their helpline folks on the phone, and they can refer you to over 4,000 resources across the county. Also, just wanted to mention this nice opportunity. If any of you or those that that there's this amazing opportunity to become actually a peer support specialist, to get certified in that. If you were inspired by those by our panelists today sharing their stories, it's for folks that have their own experiences. They can support others. So there's several requirements for that. So just feel free to take a picture, and there's also on this next slide some more of the requirements and endorsements for that, in case you're interested. And I just want to mention that there is an upcoming training opportunity through Calvary Church, which is Christine. So if you want to receive more information about that and maybe participate in that training that's already taking place, there's her contact information. Feel free to reach out to her. And then finally, this event today, as I mentioned earlier, is being brought to you by the Mental Health Promotion Action Team, or MPAT, through United Way, Broward County's Commission on Behavioral Health and Drug Prevention. Our group meets on the third Friday of every month in the afternoon. If you're potentially interested in joining that group to help plan some of our events and share resources, etc., or even just to participate in our meetings, feel free to reach out to me. That's my email address, ccohen@unitedwaybroward.org, and I will be more than happy to provide you with some more information. So that is it on our end for today's event. Just again, want to give you all a big kudos to all of our amazing panelists and to our moderator. Incredible job, Susan. And thank you all so much for taking the time to speak with all of us today, and everyone listening in to come and hear these stories and really champion lived experiences, mental health, and breaking down stigma and spreading hope. So thank you so much, everybody.